in 314 for a shooting at Century Theaters. They're saying somebody's shooting in the auditorium.
Roger, keep your fires west of the smoke. You're cleared hot. An officer hit. Send me the world.
Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again.
Welcome to Tactical Tangents.
Welcome back to Tactical Tangents. This is Mike. This episode is brought to you by Ride-On Optics. Ride-On is bringing you high-quality glass at a great value. I use and trust their scopes, binoculars, and red dot sights, and you can too with their unconditional lifetime warranty. If you ever have a problem with their gear, they will replace it, not repair it. Finish up your next build and keep a little extra cash on hand for ammo so you can actually go out and shoot that thing. Find your next optic at rideonoptics.com.
And this is Jim. This episode is also brought to you by Manus X. We've talked a lot about the tactical fantasy on this podcast, and one of the quickest ways to break your tactical fantasies and actually improve your performance is by getting real feedback. One of the ways you can do that is with Manus X. You're not going to get better at shooting on your own. You need practice, data, and coaching. And you need to make the most of your ammo with good live and dry fire training. Manus is a family of training devices that tracks you while you train. It times and tracks everything you do in a drill and coaches you as you go. It is indispensable to taking your shooting to the next level. Go find them on manusx.com.
So one of the things that Jim and I recently started talking about as it relates to work stuff is that we have a whole bunch of material from work in both of our jobs that we could talk about and debrief and use for the podcast. Some of it would be cool stories and some of it are like legitimate lessons learned, but we run into some issues when it comes to work, talking about the day-to-day stuff. For one thing, it's hard because, like, if I have a story, something that happens at work, it's probably part of, like, an ongoing investigation. And I can't really, like, I don't want to get too much into that and share too much business. And the other side of it is there's, like, security reasons. Like, some of those stories might reveal like our tactics and our tricks and some of our sneakiness that we might use to catch bad guys. And we want to be careful about putting that out in the world. And then there's a whole side of it that is, like, we don't want to sound like we're bragging or we're like, oh man, we're so cool. But it's like, well, but people appreciate some of these stories. Like, you know, it's either they can relate to them because they do the same shit that we do, or they, you know, to us, what might be more routine, maybe for others is more exciting, or vice versa. Maybe they do something way cooler than we do, and they're like, "Well, that's lame." Like, you know, but like if I'm talking to a rookie cop, then that story might be really cool. But another SWAT guy, they're like, "Okay, like what's the big deal?" So it's kind of hard to gauge, and that makes it kind of tough. And the other thing is, like, a lot of lessons learned. It would be really easy for me to come in here and talk about something that happens at work that I heard, you know, an exchange on the radio or some cop like fucked something up and, oh my God, that guy's an idiot. And then suddenly we have a podcast that's just trash talking people. So kind of as a professional courtesy, you know, we like to praise people in public and criticize in private. It's one thing to take those lessons and go somewhere with it. But as an example, as I think Jim has probably learned as well, certainly in my case, several of the people who I work with listen to the show. So, you know, all four of you, I'm sure, or whatever.
And we appreciate your business.
Yeah, like, you know, but I don't want to give the impression that I'm using that as material just to talk shit and make it sound like we're something cool or whatever. Like, that's not the point. And so, you know, we try to consolidate those lessons into episodes here and there. And Jim told me this one time that he almost crashed into a pterodactyl or something flying at work. And I was like, well, that sounds like a cool story.
Actual pterodactyl in Arizona.
Probably hear that. Yeah. So we thought we'd do a little bit of talk about times Jim might have died flying his airplanes, and we could talk about some stories. And there's probably some overarching themes, but if nothing else, maybe they'll be entertaining to say the least.
Yeah, for sure. You know, just like Mike was saying with work stuff, obviously we don't want to embarrass our respective tribes. That's something we both take very, very seriously. We want to bring honor to the family. So,
like, there's a reason we do closed door debriefs, right?
Yeah, like we don't want to air dirty laundry.
Yeah.
We don't want people to feel like they're on the record when they're hanging out with us or working with us, certainly. But I've realized that I'm fucking old at this point. And I'm, in fact, so old that most of these stories involve people who aren't in the military anymore. In fact, some of them may not be alive anymore. Yeah. That's how old I am. And I don't necessarily want some of these stories to die with me. One of the reasons, and you're going to catch that as we talk through this, one of the reasons I lived through these events was some old guy mentioned a thing offhand when I was in the simulator. And he's like, hey, by the way, sometimes this happens. And that cued me in to recognizing the problem quicker than I would have otherwise as a young, dumb co-pilot. And so that's one of the reasons why we do this podcast, right? Is to do that mentoring and that capture that institutional knowledge so that you catch on to things quicker and make better decisions and have a better OODA loop and all that stuff, right? So that's what I'm going for here. So I cracked open a bottle of scotch. I got Oban or Oban, depending on who you ask. And I told Mike that it's time for story time with Jim. So here we are. A couple caveats, because we always have to anytime we talk about work stuff. I'm going to have to fuzzy up some details just to protect the guilty and preserve security. And also, when and if I sound critical of other people, understand that what I'm really doing is I'm criticizing myself. My failure to catch it, my failure to intervene when I needed to, which is absolutely my responsibility as a crew member. And nowhere in here do I claim to be a great pilot. I am, on a good day, a very mediocre pilot who has gotten to work in some really cool communities and lived through some cool events. Like, I feel a lot like Forrest Gump stumbling through big historic, like meeting the president kind of things, right? There's
a couple things in there that I want to highlight. Like I mentioned, the closed door debriefs. We don't air our dirty laundry, and rest assured that especially when we were new and we were young, we've made most of these mistakes. But like Jim said, we're getting old, and as we look back, like it's such a whirlwind, like it's a blur. Some of that professional development that we did when our hair was still on fire, it's a blur. And
when we still had hair.
And nowadays, I still make mistakes daily. I mean, it hasn't even been a week since I made a major mistake. So these come up all the time. It's just a matter of like, well, which stories do we want to tell and how do we want to like scope it into a conversation? And part of it too is, like Jim said, that leadership component of, okay, well, if that guy sucks, then maybe you should go help him. Like maybe you should be the guy to grab him by the collar and mentor him and coach him and make it better. And so there's a sense of personal responsibility of like, well, someone else maybe screwed something up, but what could I have done to own my own role in that, to either prevent it or to mitigate it or to correct the outcome? Like there's been times for me where like I say something and I think that my direction is clear, but what I have pictured in my head, like that guy that I'm talking to, a newer guy maybe, has no frame of reference for what I just told him. Like this is his first time being in a pursuit ever. And even though I told him something that I thought made sense, he's never been there. He doesn't know. Right. So like I could have been clearer in my communication, maybe, for example. So just some caveats as we get into this, but I can't wait to hear all about times Jim almost died in an aircraft, but I'm glad you didn't, Jim.
Thank you.
But
so a little background. Not yet. So a little background. I've always wanted to be a pilot, and specifically an Air Force pilot. I watched Top Gun too many times as a kid, or Iron Eagle, or whatever cheesy 80s movies were out in the 80s. And I got the bug really, really early, like early elementary school. I was like, all I want to do is go fly jets. And that simplified every decision I made kind of growing up. I knew that's where I wanted to go. And I started talking to people about how do I get there. And they said, well, if you want to fly for the Air Force, the Air Force Academy has the best chances of getting you into a pilot slot. And so I figured that out pretty early. And so all through high school, that's all I tried to do was get into the Air Force Academy. So of course I didn't. And Got a rejection letter from them, and I was all set to go to UC Santa Barbara, which has its own beach. It's, I think, 70% women. It was going to be awesome. And then I got a phone call saying, hey, this is the Air Force Academy. We got to the bottom of the barrel, and here you are. Would you like to come out? And I'm like, damn it, let's do it. So I went off to the academy and marched in circles and got yelled at for 4 years and did a bunch of math and science-y stuff. Graduated there, went off to pilot training. Flew, at the time, the T6 trainer was brand new. Before I got to that, I had to fly a Cessna 172 while I was waiting for pilot training to get a pilot's license and establish that I don't get crazy airsick and that I am capable of landing a plane, which is still a subjective question. And so got through the Cessna stuff, and that was a blast, and got to T6s. I did that in Georgia. And the T6 at the time was a brand new airplane. It looks like a World War II fighter. It's like a prop plane, little single engine prop plane, but the inside is all high tech. It's like a space shuttle cockpit, all glass cockpit, very responsive, very forgiving airplane, a hell of a lot of fun. And I was doing that and was not great at formation flying and did not enjoy it and wasn't good at it. And I saw a C-130 doing an assault landing at the end of a runway while we were getting ready to take off on a formation flight. And I said to my instructor pilot, maybe I ought to do that when I grow up. And the instructor pilot was like, yeah, maybe you should. And that pretty well sealed my fate. I ended up in large crew served airplanes and ended up doing my next phase of pilot training with the Navy, flying King Airs. And I really loved it. I thought that the Navy had a really cool way of teaching flying. I'm glad I got to see both, kind of how the Air Force does it, which is a very rigid, regimented style, and how the Navy does it, which is a lot more fluid and a lot more challenging in kind of in funny ways. They're willing to do more things like shut down an engine in real life in flight, whereas in the Air Force, we typically do that in a simulator. And grateful for that training. Did pretty well at it.
Do it live.
That's right.
What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah. And then I got caught in like pilot training limbo forever. I got stuck because there were too many people going through training all at once and they had to kind of flow control it. And so there were whole big spans of time where I was just waiting to start the next phase of training. It's a big training pipeline. Ended up flying various types of C-130s and kind of bouncing around different communities of the C-130. So that's just kind of big picture. Most of my flying background has been in Hercs, which I love. I love the community. I love the crew. And I love the airplane. The airplane's great. But I talk about flying jets, and I had this idea when I was a little kid I was going to fly F-16s or whatever. And I respect the hell out of my fighter brethren. I really do. I am very glad I'm not one of them. I found the right community for me, and I love it. Never want to take away from the other communities. They're incredible at what they do, and I couldn't do what they do. But I love having a crew. I love having a complex aircraft and a complex mission, and I've had a hell of a lot of fun with it. So that's just kind of big picture how we got here.
We actually talked about one of these things. So Jim was flying the C-130, and at one point, me, him, and a buddy went and rented a little Cessna one time and went for a flight. We took a little trip, and we talked about this. I can't remember what episode, what the topic was, but we talked about like the hard landing, right? It was talking about experts versus novice and like, yeah, but there's lots of kinds of hard landings.
Yeah, and I've had several of them, so you're going to have to specify which hard landing we're talking about.
So like, I'm curious what the hard, like, because that was just, you're used to flying a plane that sits at a different height than this little Cessna was. And so it was just like, the distance is just a little discrepancy there. But I'm curious what the hardest landing you've ever had was.
That's a good question. So the C-130 is kind of famous for doing hard landings, right? It lands in small dirt landing strips, that kind of thing. So much like Eskimos have a lot of different definitions of snow, we have a lot of different definitions of hard landings. Much like the our Army brethren, the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, what they call a hard landing is different from what we call a hard landing. If you survive it, usually they call it a hard landing. My hardest landing actually wasn't in the Herc. It was in a King Air. So the King Air is a twin-engine prop plane. You see them at local civil airports. You might hear it called a doctor killer because a doctor will go by it and be way out of his or her flying expertise and get themselves hurt flying it. Great airplane, very forgiving. I was going through training with the Navy, and I got paired up with another student. So it was two students flying by themselves solo. And they didn't tell me anything about this other student, just, hey, she needs to go do pattern work. This is her solo. You're going to sit there and do co-pilot duties for her. I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. And what I didn't know was she was a garbage pilot. Just was. Happens. And so we are flying around the pattern on the very first landing, and we get lined up. That particular airplane can land in something like a 600 foot per minute descent, which is, picture moving 600 feet in a minute. That's a pretty darn firm impact with the ground.
200
you
yards,
the earth.
an eighth of a mile. Yeah.
Yeah, math. And she brought us down at least twice that. It was probably about a 1,200 foot per minute descent. And what I remember thinking as we were on very short final is like, well, this is about when I would flare, when I would pull the nose up to slow down and arrest our descent as we approach the ground and hit ground effect. And then she didn't. And so I made assumptions about her capacity and competence and recognition of the fact that we were in a very, very steep descent. And we smashed into the runway. And this was at a little training field in South Texas. And we're supposed to do a touch and go. So we hit the ground and we're screaming down the runway. And when we hit the ground, I could see the wings flex down, which to this day kind of haunts me. And we're still rolling down the runway. And she throws her hands up in the air, does the like, oh my God, what do we do thing? And we're running out of runway. I'm like, take off. We got to go.
Yeah.
And,
gas. Like,
yeah. And so she put the power in finally, and we climbed away from the ground. She's still kind of flustered and freaked out.
Yeah.
And what I should have done was call a go around, aborted the landing, right? At that point, what I should have done was taken the plane and said, okay, well, you're freaked out. I'm going to land us and we're going to figure this out. I was too young and too stupid to do that. So what I did instead was I did sort of like that scene in the first Top Gun where Maverick's trying to like coach Cougar and he's like, okay, you're a little low, you're a little high. Okay. You got this. Right. And so I tried to like coach her around the pattern. Finally, we landed and got out of the plane, and I got out and kissed the ground. And as far as I know, she got qualified and went off to a successful flying career. But that was one of my very first, like, really intense flying moments. And it was pretty early in my flying career. And the big thing that I caught out of that was don't assume the other person is good at what they do. And don't assume they see the same things you do. Don't assume that they are going to fix it the way you would. And then if you have to take the plane, take the plane. Like
there's a mechanism for that, right?
Yeah, we have a saying that go-arounds, a wave off aborted landings, are free. You're always allowed to do that. Now, in the civil world, they're not free. If you abort a landing in an airliner, that might be a $20,000 expenditure of fuel, which cuts into your profit margins and your
and in
your
combat
sharing.
It could come at a cost in combat potentially as well, right? Like not just in the civil settings.
You know, there are places I don't want to do a whole lot of pattern work, right? On the other hand, if I do the enemy's job for them by smashing the airplane into the ground, I didn't win anything, right? So I'm big on go-arounds are free, and that particular experience was a good learning point on that.
Have you ever almost crashed into another plane, like in the air?
Many times. So the national bird of Iraq and Afghanistan is the drone, the Predator, the Reaper. And so many times.
Ours, right?
Usually, at least back in the day. And so many times I've gotten very, very close to a drone, which is very uncomfortable because the drone is looking through a soda straw, so they don't see us. And so that's uncomfortable. But the closest I ever got was actually very early in pilot training. I was in the T6, which is a sporty little airplane. And one of the cool things about sporty little airplanes is you can do acrobatics and aerobatics with them, right? So we were in the aerobatics phase and learning how to do spins and stalls and steep turns and all the stuff you see at air shows, like big clover leaf loop-de-loops, aileron rolls, barrel rolls, that kind of thing. And so we're out in the training airspace, which was controlled by air traffic control. And so they clear you into a big cube block of airspace. So there's a floor, there's a ceiling, and there's lateral confines. And the idea is you're supposed to be away from everybody else when you're doing this stuff, right? So we get cleared into the airspace. And we do a couple of clearing turns. So you turn sharply so you can look all around you. And so we did that a couple times. That's also where you practice your anti-G strain, where you tense up your leg muscles and make sure that you can push the blood up into your head when you're doing all these maneuvers. And we didn't see anything. Everything was cool. The instructor pilot, who was sitting behind me, so this is a tandem seat airplane, he takes the controls. He's going to demonstrate how to enter a spin and then recover from a spin. So that's kind of pretty early in the aerobatics phase where we were doing this. And the T6 is a great airplane, very stable. It doesn't want to spin. You can force it to spin, and then it will basically recover itself from the spin, which is cool.
Yeah. I've heard that, like, do less is a big...
Yeah. So the bold face, the emergency procedures for the traditional trainer in the Air Force back in the day was pretty complicated. You had to put in certain corrections at a certain time and do them just right so the plane would recover. In the T6, you can literally put your hands up against the windows and it will fix itself eventually.
Hopefully before the ground.
Yeah. So we call that the screaming student pilot style. Will eventually fix it. So he puts us into a spin. It is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. So we're upside down, inverted. The plane has stopped spinning, but we're still stalled.
And for those who are listening to this and can't see Jim, he's literally showing us that he's inverted, just like Tom Cruise did.
I've got my hands. I'm pointing at my Breitling watch and my Air Force Academy class ring. It's great.
Because he was inverted.
So yeah, I was definitely inverted. 9Gs. Yeah, good times. So we're upside down. We're still in a stall. We stop spinning, and another airplane comes underneath us, close enough that I could tell who was flying it.
Jesus.
Her name was Robin. I could tell by her physique who she was, even though she was wearing an oxygen mask, right?
What's up, girl? Is this where you guys do the I can't remember what's Maverick do in the first Top Gun when they're overhead? He flips them off or something, right?
Yeah. So that definitely was not happening. At this point, I'm like, holy shit, there's somebody underneath us. And the instructor was like, whoa, I have the airplane. And I'm like, you have the airplane. He always had the airplane.
Please.
And we did, like, if the plane could make this sound, that as we missed each other sound, that's the sound it would have made. And so we kind of stabilize and do a couple more clearing turns. And we have a little discussion. And he's like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah. Are you okay? He's like, yeah. And we're talking about, do we continue the mission or not? Do we move to a different training airspace? And he's flying around and he's like, I'm feeling very mortal right now. Maybe we should land. And I'm like, sir, I think that's a great idea. Let's go land. And so we landed. We ended up filing paperwork off of that, a hazardous air traffic report. We said, hey, we don't really know what happened, but there shouldn't have been a plane in our block.
WTF, right? Over.
Yeah. Yeah. And it turned out there's an air traffic controller on their first day, and they literally cleared us both in the same space, and we were doing our turns and our check-in. Well, that plane was checking the automated weather broadcast, the ATIS broadcast at the field. And so they didn't hear us. We didn't hear them. We didn't see each other because we were offset vertically. And man, that was probably for sure the closest I've come to dying in the plane, I'd say.
That's spicy. Well, I don't know if you could top that one. Any others?
So fairly in the last couple of years, I was flying into a landing zone, and short final, landing gears down, everything. We were set to land, and 2 Chinook helicopters flew right between us and the runway, and close enough that we set off. Our presence set off their flares.
Wow.
So the helicopter defensive systems thought
you
it
were
was
a
getting
missile.
shot at because I was that close to them. So that was really exciting because 1, these helicopters show up, and 2, the whole world lights up because all their flares are popping out. And 3, we're trying to decide, do I go around? Because go-arounds are free. If by going around, am I going to run into another helicopter? Because there's always more than one, and there was. And so we ended up having kind of do a deep dive about that, and we had to talk to some of our partner forces about how they ended up where they were. And what we figured out from that was it was a topography problem. There was rolling hills around this landing zone that were blocking the radio. So we were making our calls, they were making their calls, we think, but we weren't hearing each other because there were rocks in the way.
They weren't line of sight, right?
Yep. And this is a recurring theme all throughout Tactical Tangents is like, and then the comms sucked, right? And sometimes the radio dies, sometimes the person talking on the radio screws up, and sometimes it's...
Or everyone's talking and no one can get a word out.
Yep. And sometimes it's sunspots. Who knows? But in this instance, we think it was hills.
Jesus. One of the favorite stories, I actually told this story today at work to somebody. We were talking about, so we're at work, we were running a canine high-risk deployment seminar that we hosted for agencies from all over. And I was running the station where we were exposing the dogs to different forms of technology. We had drones. Brink Drones is one of our sponsors. Obviously at work, I also work with those drones. So we'd fly a drone past the dog. Our bomb robot, we'd have the bomb robot out in the building that it had to work past, our mini Throwbot robots. We had a bunch of technology out there to see how the dogs were going to respond. And the whole lesson in that for the dog handlers coming through is, hey, if you go and you support one of your other agencies, or your tactical team or whatever, and they're like, hey, we're going to throw a drone up, like, you might want to know how your dog's going to respond to that because it might freak some dogs out, right? Like the little things like that, the buzzing in the air, they see it in the air, they might think it's a toy, they want to grab it, they might get spooked by it. And on a real deployment, that's not the time to figure that out, right? You want to know ahead of time.
I am 100% sure a working dog has eaten a drone.
Probably.
And also... Yeah, I'm really excited about that brink ball, but one of these days I'm going to see one in your dog's mouth. That's going to happen.
No, well, I might stage that if I'm being totally honest, but that actually came up. We talked about that, and the brink ball just launched. This is like basically a throw phone, modern day throw phone that Brink just came out with. And one of the things that I want to get my hands on it to do the same kind of training is to expose the dog to it and to train them to be neutral to it. Well, it looks like a ball, so that's going to be tricky. It should be fun. I'm sure it'll be great. But anyway, the whole point is there's all these things that you anticipate going wrong. And then there's always the unexpected things. And the story that I told earlier today was, like, of all the things that can go wrong in the middle of a takeoff, one of my favorite Jim stories is the time that his seat came unlocked. Can you tell us that one?
Oh, yeah. So...
Of all the
I was a student in the C-130, right? So going through initial training as a co-pilot in the C-130, and I'm going through the simulators. And the guys who teach simulators are red-blooded Americans. Often they have completed a full Air Force career and then some, and often an airline career, and then they come back and they teach at the sim, right? So these are often older gentlemen. You never want to ask them about politics or current events.
You probably know how they'll respond.
But great Americans and great instructors, and I've learned a lot of very, very important lessons from them. And one of them made an offhand comment to me, like, "Hey, by the way, sometimes the seat comes unlocked in the Herc, and you might end up sliding back." And I'm like, "Okay, cool, good to know." you know, and I'm sitting there trying to memorize all my hydraulic pressures and my, you know, how many amps are in the thermal fuse of the brakes or some shit.
How many decimal points are in the...
Yeah.
When you reset the clock, I remember this one. When you reset the clock, where does it start flashing? Yeah.
What's the only wooden part of a C-130? Where are the mirrors, which is the galley and the navigator's purse? There's a lot, right? And so I file that away in my long list of shit I'm supposed to remember. And I get to the flying phase, so I'm in an actual real airplane finally, and doing the things. And I screwed up a landing, like I do. And the instructor pilot's like, okay, I'll take the plane. I'll teach you how to do it right. I'm like, okay, cool. And so he's sitting left seat. I'm sitting right seat. He's demonstrating a touch and go. So we touch down, roll down the runway. We rotate for takeoff. And all of a sudden we get really, really nose high and really, really slow. And I don't know what all of our listeners know about airplanes, but you have to move through the air for the wings to work. That's like a thing. And so if you get too slow, it's not that the engine stalls, it's the wings stalls. You stop producing lift or enough lift to counter the weight of the plane, and then gravity takes over, right? And so we start getting real nose high and we start getting real slow. And the C-130 does not have the energy to accelerate straight up. It's not like a thing that we do. We're not a fighter, right? And so I look over to the pilot and be like, what the hell are you doing? And he gone. There is no pilot. And I keep looking, and what I realized was his seat had unlocked. And so with the deck angle, he was rolling back and he was grabbing the controls, trying to pull himself forward with the controls, and had him kind of death gripped. And I said, whoa, my airplane. And he said the words, your airplane, but he didn't let go.
Here's the thing.
And that model of the C-130 had a flight engineer and enlisted crew member who sat behind him between the two pilots. And he put his boot on the back of the pilot's seat and kicked it forward while I wrestled the controls away, got the nose down, we flew away. And that whole sequence was maybe 2 seconds long. And I think that's the biggest thing that I would emphasize with that story is that from the time the problem started to the time I realized it to the time we intervened and saved ourselves was maybe 2 to 5 seconds. It happened that fast, right? There are times you have to have fast hands. There are times you have to just react. And there are times you need to slow the hell down and smoke a lucky and slow as smooth as fast, whatever, right? This was one of the times where fast hands and fast words kept us from stalling and falling.
Yeah, and that's one of the things about doing classroom training and PowerPoint training. When you're teaching cops, for example, shoot, no shoot type decisions, or, you send them into a situation and you expect them to respond a certain way. You don't get to always slow things down to the point that you can make a list of alternatives and deliberate your choices. You've got to just respond, right? And so like figuring out what that stimulus is and having enough, maybe not expertise, but at least having like a well-rounded enough kind of understanding of your environment is going to inform that choice that you take. And what I love about that example is, of all the things, taking off is a time where you're just generating enough energy to get off the ground in an airplane, right? And something going wrong when you're still not going very fast and you're still not very high doesn't give you a whole lot of time to fix problems that come up. And so there's all kinds of things that can happen is, like an engine can catch on fire, or some of your controls might fail or something like that. And suddenly you've got 500 feet or whatever to figure that out, right? Like that's one of the things. So it's just, of all the things that could go wrong, it's like your seat coming undone. I love it.
Yes.
I don't love it, but it's a good example of the kind of stuff you wouldn't anticipate.
So I sucked my whole seat cushion up into my butthole
right
while that was happening. So that was happening on my seat while his seat was coming unlocked. Yeah. So that was a good time.
This is Mike, and I just want to jump in real quick to announce our new partnership with Brink Drones. Brink has created life-saving capabilities in a drone that can break windows, fly into houses and confined spaces, and even crash into things and stay in the air with advanced pilot assistance that does not use GPS. Brink drones are built in the USA. It has night vision and IR that can function in blacked out and zero light conditions. It can flip itself back over, and it is a flying cell phone with two-way communication and a live video feed. It can even carry and drop off items for hostage negotiators with the payload feature. Brink has a really cool and compelling heritage that came to be after the 1 October mass shooting at Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas, and they are committed in their mission to leverage technology to save lives. And I can tell you firsthand that their drones will do just that by flying into places that are too dangerous to risk human lives. If you work in public safety, your agency needs to see what this drone can do. Go check out Brink Drones at brinkdrones.com, or feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to tell you all about them. Again, that's Brink, BRINC, drones.com. Speaking of engine fires and stuff, like, have you ever had anything catch on fire?
I've had a couple. So, couple stories here. First off, this one time, I was flying a local exercise in the American Southwest, and young co-pilot, but I'd been around for a little bit, enough that I had done a couple of emergency procedures, and we'd done some precautionary engine shutdowns for oil leaks and that kind of thing. So I felt like I pretty well understood the game, and I understood it's not a big deal to lose an engine in a Herc. You got 3 more. It's a tri-motor with a spare. You're good, right? No big deal. So we're flying around in this exercise. We got a couple other airplanes with us, and we get a fire light. So indications of a fire on one of the motors. And I say, hey, pilot, we got a fire light in the number 3 fire handle. And he's like, okay, cool. Well, we don't see a fire. We're going to go ahead and honor the light. We're going to shut it down. And so I execute the boldface, shut down the motor. Boldface is the memory steps that a pilot has to know to execute without having to refer to the checklist. So, the initial things that you do, you knock those out, and then you open up the checklist and you clean up the rest of the emergency procedure.
This is like the pilot version of tap rack, right? Like, or doing a reload or something like that. It's just those things that are just reactive. You have to have
action
them.
Drill,
yeah.
Right? Yeah. So I execute the boldface, shut down the motor, and the fire light doesn't go out. We don't see a fire. We don't smell a fire. We don't see indications in the gauges of a fire. But our culture and our book says, hey, if it's telling you it's on fire, you should probably believe it. It's reasonable. That's why we pay it to be there, right?
It's better than letting it spread.
Yeah. So we blew the fire extinguisher bottle into it, and then blew the second fire extinguisher bottle into it. And so we're doing our cleanup procedures. Our cleanup procedures involve making a radio call to air traffic control. And usually when you do that and you declare an emergency with air traffic control, they've got a bunch of questions they have to ask you. They get out their emergency procedure book and they say, how many souls do you have on board? So the fire department knows how many people to look for. How much fuel do you have in both time and pounds, so that we know how long we've got to work with, and we know how much fire retardant we might need to spray you down with, that kind of thing, right? So they've got their things they need to knock out. And also, what's your plan? What are your intentions? Are you going to land locally, or are you going to go back to your base? That kind of thing. So we were doing this big exercise, right? And I've talked about it before in the podcast, make a big deal about making a distinction between real world stuff and exercise stuff. And you don't want to get them confused. You don't want people thinking that something's an exercise inject when you really do have an engine shut down. So in my mind, I very calmly said to air traffic control, by the way, this is a real world. We have a motor shut down, and we have a fire light that's not extinguished. We don't think we're still on fire, though. That's how I said it in my head. We land uneventfully, no big deal. We get to the big mass crew debrief with the other crews that were flying, and they're like, oh yeah, Jim, are you okay, buddy? Because you sounded like, oh my God, this is real world. We're going to die. And I'm like, I did not say that. And they're like, oh, but you did. We have the tapes. And so
roll the tapes.
I got debriefed on the tone of my voice when that happened. That was a good time. So that was, as far as we know, a fake fire. We think it was just a bad indication. It was a real engine shutdown, though. So we turned ourselves into a 3-motor airplane in honor of the light, right? The time I had a real fire, and this is a little bit more complicated of a story, I was deployed. We were doing a FARP. So we landed at an austere airfield, ran hoses out from the airplane from big fuel bladders we have in the cargo hold, and we ran fuel out to Chinook helicopters that were supporting an operation. This airfield was pretty austere, didn't have much in the way of security. And so, our alertness is up, but this is fairly standard, traditional mission set for that aircraft. We're there the first night. Things go great. We go the second night to do a very similar op. Things go great. We go there the third night for a very similar op. And we're sitting there for hours, right? It takes a while for the team to go do its thing and then come back. And so we're there long enough where I'm like, and we have our engines running because we might need to get out real fast. And we use the engines to power all this stuff. And a couple hours in, I'm like, I gotta pee. I gotta get out of the seat. I gotta pee. So I go to the back of the plane and toward the front of the plane, so the wall that separates the cargo hold from the flight deck, there are these big urinal cans. It looks like a big coffee urn that you pee into. And I'm standing on a big fuel bladder trying to get into this can wearing night vision goggles and all my body armor and kit and stuff. And it's not working. Nothing's working.
Sounds like a clusterfuck.
One of the problems is having a tiny penis. That made everything else worse. And so I'm sitting there peeing, and I look up and I see a bunch of lights dancing around on the ceiling. And we're blacked out, right? We're trying to be as stealthy as you can make a C-130. We're trying to make it dark.
With the engines running, right?
The engines are running, right? So 100 million decibels outside. But, we're trying to draw less attention to ourselves. And I'm about ready to go get in a fight with the flight engineer about having lights on when we need to not have lights on. And I realize we don't have lights there. That's not a place there are lights on a C-130.
And that's because
we were on fire. And so I see the flames dancing around and I'm like, well, shit. And I'm still peeing, of course, while this is happening. So, picture, a fire hose just whipping wildly in the wind while this is happening. And I turn
a fire hose,
straw, whatever,
a fire cord.
Yeah. So I zip up, I turn around. Depends on the day. So I zip up and I turn around. At least I remember zipping up, and I tell my crew chief. So we had a flying maintainer who rode with us on ops like that. I'm like, "Hey man, we're on fire!" And he's like, he looks up. He's like, "Oh shit!" And he tosses me out of the way like a rag doll and grabs a fire extinguisher and actually puts out the fire instead of me just pointing at it. And then right about that time, the guys up front had seen indications that something was very wrong, and they had started shutting down the motors without me up in the seat to help. So that was cool. So the airplane gets very quiet and very dark, and the fire goes out because they hit it with a fire extinguisher. And then we all just kind of stand there and look at each other like, what the hell do we do now? And I said, let's get the fuck off this airplane because we just had a fire and we're full of gas fumes, right? And so we get off the plane into what I describe as a minefield. It was not probably a minefield, but it's the deployed environment.
Definitely feels like one.
Everything's a minefield. Yeah. And one of my big lessons on that was you leave the plane with whatever is physically attached to your body. So we had all kinds of cool Pelican cases full of ninja gear and go bags and camelbacks and whatever, guns and radios and shit. All of that got left on the plane. So if the plane had decided to catch fire again and burn itself down, we would have left all of that.
Yeah, you got what's in your pockets.
I left the plane with what was in my pockets. So I had my trusty Nina, my M9, and I was wearing my body armor because at that time, we were always flying in body armor. And I think I had like a finger light, like a little green LED finger light. And that's what I had. And we get off, kind of take accountability, make sure we got everyone, make sure the fire's actually out, which it was. And then we had to figure out kind of what to do next. We're stuck on this austere landing zone. We just had a fire. It turned out to be an electrical fire. It was a big electrical relay that connects the generators to the rest of the plane. And there was no easy way out of that. We ended up kind of stuck for hours on this landing zone. And I was a little concerned the sun was going to come up and anyone who wanted to mess with us could. There was a reason we were doing ops in this area. There were dirt bags in the area. And so I suggested like, hey, maybe I know I'm kind of Rambo-y. I know I'm Jim and I'm the gun guy, but maybe we should get the real guns out. And the load masters look at me like, oh yeah, it's a good idea. And they don't want to turn on a flashlight and they're all locked up in a Pelican case, like a big black plastic case. And they can't figure out the combo. Like they don't want to turn on a light and they can't see the numbers. And the numbers are something silly, password or whatever. But they can't see them. So eventually they turn on a flashlight and get all the guns out. And at the time we had a very elaborate set of guns. We had machine guns and grenade launchers, that kind of thing that we almost never touched. And, I was not totally confident that we were going to work those effectively and not hurt ourselves touching them, to be honest. But we had them, so that made me feel a little bit better. And then eventually another aircraft flew in with a maintenance package and some spare parts. And that got us up and running enough that we could start the motors without much in the way of electrics on the plane and fly back to our home base. So that was a very exciting night for me. That was where I felt like I kind of earned my spurs in the combat flying world, was when my plane caught fire in the shit. But my big lesson on that was you will leave the plane with what's attached to you. I think that's kind of the key thing there. And also you don't get to pick the day that things are going to go weird, right? Yeah. It had gone great several days leading up to that. It went great every day after that. That particular day, it went shitty.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And I think that's a lesson that comes across everything. I mean, I drive around in a patrol car all day and I've got a bunch of shit in the back of that thing, right? But then I take my dog and I go wandering down an alley looking for a dude who ran from the cops. And whenever things get weird, 6 or 8 or 30 houses away, none of that does me any good. Right? It's, I got a big old medic bag, but if I don't have an IFAC on my person, it doesn't matter. Right? So I think those are good lessons. You mentioned that you were standing on top of a fuel bladder in that case, which is just kind of crazy. But
yes.
I'm curious if you've ever run out of gas that you're willing to admit or anything like that.
So it's actually a big deal in pilot training. They teach you that running out of gas is not a thing you want to do, and it has happened. I've met guys who've run themselves out of gas.
Definitely not you, though, huh?
You and I actually both know a guy who had to land on a freeway because he starved his motor of gas back in SoCal.
I have some guesses. I'm going to reserve that for off the record.
But as it happens, the guy did great and he recovered the plane safely. So kudos to him if he's listening. But
except that it was preventable.
Almost all fuel starvation is preventable to an extent, right? When we're overseas, sometimes we have to accept some risk as far as our fuel load goes, that kind of thing.
Now, I will say, though, that there are lots of things that happen in the world outside of running out of gas, right? Yeah. That were preventable, but
an
oversight or an underestimate. Shit happens, right? That's real life.
It's easy to judge.
Yeah, that's real life. So. And then you're there and you're like, I can't believe I did that. I know better, blah, blah, blah.
I've had a couple cases where I had my fingers crossed, like, man, I hope the headwind doesn't change, because if it does, I'm hosed, right? Like I've had a couple moments like that. I had one flying across the Atlantic, and that's never a time you want to have a big gas issue flying across the Atlantic, where the navigator started getting real uncomfortable with what he was seeing with the gas plan and the headwinds, and he's like, "Hey, we're not going to make our destination. I need you to divert. This is not okay. I need you to move." And I'm like, done. That wasn't
Sir, yes, sir.
Yeah, it wasn't one I was going to argue. Right?
Yeah.
So he did a great job pointing that out. At the time, I had 2 navigators. They're both fabulous and probably saved us that day because I'm not a math guy, and I like having other people on the plane that can do math for me. So that's good. I had a case in recent years where the fuel system got weird. The fuel pumps weren't working the way they were supposed to, and fuel was getting trapped in a gas tank that doesn't feed the motors. And the gas tank that does feed the motors was getting starved. So fuel was moving from that gas tank out to an outer gas tank, and I didn't have the ability to move the gas back into the gas tank that fed the motors. And it got worse every time I turned. The plane didn't like the turning. It turns out you have to turn a plane to like land, do mission things, turn back toward home, that kind of thing. And the way we caught it was the fuel was getting more and more out of balance. I was getting very heavy on one side and very light on the other. And that usually isn't that big of a deal. We can usually fix that by hitting some buttons and turning on and off pumps, that kind of thing. And this was not in a Herc. I should clarify. Hercs have the ability to move gas around, especially the modified Hercs have the ability to move gas around in a way that this airplane didn't. And so we noticed that the gas is getting unbalanced. That was the first thing that kind of got our attention. And we got stuff to do. We're doing mission things. We're out doing the job, hacking the mish, that kind of thing. And so it's usually kind of an afterthought. And then I keep looking at the gas, and it keeps getting worse instead of fixing. And I said to my crew members, I'm like, "Hey guys, something's wrong here." And it's one of those
not
where
a doctor, but
where everyone kind of caught on at the same time. We all kind of said, "Whoa, this is not right." And so I had my co-pilot get out the books, and he's going through the systems diagrams, and we have these very elaborate anatomy physiology diagrams of, where the fuel lines are and which valve might be fucked up, and maybe we can reset a circuit breaker. Except if it's a fuel thing and a circuit breaker pop, maybe you don't want to reset it because maybe it popped for a reason, and you don't want arcs and sparks around the fuel. It's like a thing, right?
I'm not an electrician, but
you don't want to detonate the plane. It's like it's somewhere in the rule book. Don't detonate the plane.
Pro tip.
Yeah, and so my crew members suggested, hey, maybe we can call back to the maintenance guys, and we have great radios, and we did a beyond line of sight radio call and said, hey, maintenance guys, what do you think? And they're like, we think you should go home. And I'm like, I agree. Off we go. And we flew home. So that was a case where gas got weird. But the weirdest gas wasn't my own airplane's gas. So this one time, I'm taking off, deployed environment. I do a lot of flying when I'm deployed, so a lot of my funnier stories, I think, are deployed. And we're moving a big generator for the Navy. And this generator is like roughly the size of a semi-trailer. Like it's one of the big ones. And we have some rules on the airplane that if I'm going to move something with a big engine, if it's got a big gas tank, we want that gas tank to be basically empty. That's a rule. It's a rule that has been written in blood because it has been messed up, right? A little literary foreshadowing. So, new plane, new day. I'm moving this generator, and we go to take off, and we start climbing away. And basically right away, I hear my loadmaster in the back say, "Pilot, I need you to turn around and land right now." Which I've never heard anyone say anything like that to me. And so it's another one of those, like, we ain't going to argue.
Roger that.
Roger that. Off we go, right? And I had to trust the guy. I can't see what he sees in the back. And so we pull into the downwind to come back and do a circuit, come back and land. And I say, okay, we're doing that. What's going on back there? And, I expect it might take a couple potatoes to verbalize what you're seeing. And he's like, "Pilot, we are covered in gas." And I don't know or care usually what's sitting in the back. If I'm hauling cargo, it's just cargo. I don't really care. And so what I pictured was the the airplane was leaking gas. I thought I had a big gas leak.
Oh,
and
boy.
I'm like, oh, really?
It's problematic.
And he's like, no, there is a gas leak, but we're not leaking the gas. This big ass generator just dumped like 100 gallons of gas in the back. And he's like, we're up to our ankles in it, and we need to go on oxygen. And so we all went on oxygen, put on our oxygen masks, and the Quick Dawn oxygen masks. It's funny how often they're not plugged in. And it's funny how often the communication connections are not plugged in. So there's almost always a couple of minutes of fumbling to get the mask on and get get everything kind of resituated. And we come back and we land, and then we got in a discussion about whether we should do an emergency egress once we got on the ground. We all knew that we didn't want to stop on the runway, right? In a deployed environment, shutting down the runway is a problem. You want the other planes to be able to get in and out. And so we all agreed that we wanted to taxi clear, but my pilot really hesitated on calling emergency ground egress. And so we taxied basically all the way back into parking. And then when it got too ridiculous, then he stopped. Then he said, okay, we're going to shut down, but we're not going to do the egress. Well, the thing is, when you don't call for the egress, you end up not really doing all the checklists to shut everything down correctly. And so one of my lessons on that is you have procedures for a reason, do them, right? And if you're going to do a traditional shutdown, do a full checklist shutdown. If you're going to do an emergency ground egress, do that, but don't do half of each. Do the whole thing, right? So we get out of the plane.
And if you're going to go off script, it has to be
on purpose and briefed,
deliberate, and for very specific set of reasons, right?
And as it happens, my aircraft commander is a phenomenal dude, and I learned a lot from him, and a phenomenal pilot. I happen to disagree with that one call, but so we get off the plane and we try to get accountability and count up all the souls on board and stuff, and one of the passengers came up to me. He's like, sir, that was crazy. I was totally passed out. I'm like, what do you mean passed out? Like, my flying was so smooth. Like, you fell asleep. He's like, no, I was overcome by the fumes. I was the fuck unconscious. They kicked me to get me up and get me out of the plane. I'm like, go find a medic.
Yeah, you should probably get that checked out.
Off you go. And one of the funnier things about this was they pulled the generator off, and then we started talking about, okay, well, we're going to continue the mission. We're going to get these passengers where they're going. We're going to go do our next pickup at our next site. And I said, hey, wait a second. We're full of gas fumes, like full of gas fumes. If we start the motors, we're going to detonate the plane. It's probably not in the tech order. We probably shouldn't do that.
Again, not a doctor.
Yeah, not a doctor. But I have had a barbecue or two where I burn my eyebrows off, right? And that's one of the problems. When fuel vaporizes, it does funny things, it turns out. And the guys were very confused by me saying that. And they're like, "Not Jim, like we're going to go." And I'm like, no, we're not. We're full of gas fumes. This is a bad idea. And one of the guys pulled me aside and it's like, Jim, we're going to go with this. This is our mission. We're going to go. Don't be that guy. And I'm like, it's not about being that guy. It's about the physics of aerosolized fuel and turbine engines. Like, this is a bad idea. Like, I'm happy breaking rules, but this is not a rule. This is laws of science, right? And finally they kind of rolled their eyes like, okay, well, what's it going to take to make you comfortable? And I'm like, first off, fuck off. Second, I don't know, do something, air it out, get the fuel out of it. And the maintainer's like, well, what if we pressure washed? I'm like, that's a great idea. Why don't you pressure wash it? So they pressure washed the floor a little bit, which actually did help. And so they came up to me again and like, Jim, are you good? And I'm like,
you good, buddy? You're all right?
I'm like, yeah, well, it doesn't smell like gas, so fuck it, let's try it. So we started motors and we continued on our mission. But it was one of those times where I never expected that was where I was going to have to put my foot down. where I was going to have to like plant my flag, fall on my sword.
We might blow up if we
throw in my man card or whatever over that. Right. But there was kind of a group think going on where the crew was all gung ho, and maybe they didn't smell what I smelled. Maybe they haven't had the barbecues I've had where I've had my eyebrows singed off. I think that experience as a Beavis and Butthead watching teenager shaped my operational risk management as a pilot. So,
and for those who don't know, Beavis and Butthead was a mature kid cartoon back in the day.
It's back. It's on Paramount.
Yeah.
It's very exciting.
True. One of the things that I've heard pilots talk about and I've read about in, post-accident, collision type reports, those investigations, is controlled flight into terrain. And there's I think that's like an acronym maybe.
CFIT, controlled flight into terrain.
Yeah. And or spatial disorientation, especially if you're flying through clouds and stuff like that. Have you ever run into any good cases of that sort of thing?
I have definitely experienced spatial disorientation. I've definitely experienced illusions, which is, airfield that has brighter lights looks closer than it is. Airfield with dimmer lights looks further away. Wide airfields look closer. Narrow airfields look further away. That happens regularly. And you counter that by trusting your instruments, by doing a study of the airfield you're going to so you know what to expect. So you don't land on the wrong airfield, among other things, or way too high, way too low. One of the closest I ever got, so funny thing, it was on the same mission where we had the firelight that wouldn't go out. A lot happened that night. Night vision goggles, so everything's green at the time. Trying to get lined up on a runway. And I saw what I thought were the runway lights, like the lights at the very beginning edge of the runway. I saw 4 distinct lights, and I thought, man, maybe those are runway termination bars. Maybe I should line up on those. And I didn't see the runway. I saw those lights. So I was very lined up on those lights. And I was a mediocre enough pilot that probably the rest of the crew was like, well, he's doing the best he can. He's probably lined up on it. And we get closer and closer and closer to him. And one of the other crew members who wasn't on night vision was like, hey, what are you lined up on right now? I'm like, the runway. And he's like, no, the hell you're not. And I was lined up on the PAPIs, the precision approach path indicator lights. So if you're low, it should look like 4 red lights. And if you're high, it looks like 4 white lights. And if you're right on the wire, it should be 2 white, 2 red, right? So they change color based on your angle in relation to the runway. The problem is they ain't on the runway. They are next to the runway in a grass field. And I was very lined up to land on them, and I'm very close to landing when finally I was like, that is not the runway. I'm going around. And off we went.
Go-arounds are free-ish.
Go-arounds are free. And man, I got to exercise it that night, right?
Ish.
Similar case, and really kind of interesting. So I was landing deployed environment. And deployed environment's weird because you can't pull notices on the airfield in some of these places. And if you do, sometimes they're old, sometimes there's a language barrier, all kinds of stuff. So we're going to a deployed field and we're having a hard time making out the runway. Real hard time. And the navigator on this plane had a really good radar and he was an excellent navigator. And he's like, okay, I got it. I got it on radar. I'm lining you up. And where he was guiding us was different from where the navigation computer was taking us. So the GPS was taking us one way, and the radar was taking us maybe like a half mile right of where the GPS was taking us. And I had never had that happen before. I'd never had it so far off. But I had a very competent navigator, excellent guy, great dude. And I trusted him. And I still trust him. And he's like, Jim, I got this. Take this heading, line up on this runway. And I'm like, dude, I have never had the GPS be off this much for no good reason. And the INS and all the other stuff that we had on the plane. And so we got into it. He's like, no, I see the runway on the radar. And I'm like, this isn't right. We're a half mile off of where we should be. This isn't right. And I'm like, you know what? We're going to go around out of it. We'll do a low pass. We'll see what's up. And as we went around, we saw the cranes and tractors that were set up on the new runway they were building. That looked like a big, beautiful runway on the radar, but was not a thing I could land on. If I landed on it, I would have ripped the bottom of the plane out on a crane or a tractor.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Sketch. I still want to know about the pterodactyl, though.
Oh, the pterodactyl. So there it was. This was one of the more complicated emergencies I've had. And the funny thing about it is I was not at the controls for any of this. One of the things about a big airplane is often you're not the guy flying it. Sometimes you're sitting in the back. Sometimes you're in a hammock when this stuff happens. So we were doing a local
Air
training
Force
sortie.
Pilot. Of course he's in the hammock. I just want to point that out.
Of course I'm in the hammock, yeah. So we're doing a local training sortie in Arizona. And we're doing practice landings out at one of the Army bases in southern Arizona. And things are going great. We're having a great time. I actually nailed a couple landings. Very proud of myself for where I was. And so I'm done with my little piece of it. I go to the back. The pilots up front are getting ready to fly home when they get a indication that the propeller is leaking oil in such a way that it could seize up in a high drag situation, and that would be bad. And so the checklist calls for precautionary shutdown of the engine. So they did a precautionary shutdown of the engine. So we're 3 engine. Not a big deal. We declare an emergency and we're getting ready to fly home. So we start flying home. I'm still sitting in the back, checking my, I don't know, it was probably a BlackBerry back in the day. Checking my BlackBerry. That was a precursor to a real iPhone. And they get ready to put the landing gear down on final, and the landing gear doesn't come down all the way. And so that was awkward. So they went around out of that and went into a holding pattern, and they get out the big tech manual, the -1 tech manual. And it's got there's a long list of things you can do to verify your landing gear is down. And so this was the nose gear wasn't down all the way, or was not indicating down all the way. And so one of the things you can do in a C-130 is you can actually see the landing gear. There's a little window down underneath the cockpit where the flight engineer can go down and look through a window. And if there's a little pin stuck through a hole, stuck through a nut, then you know that it's down and locked and everything's cool. Except this had been painted over. That pin had been painted over. And so he couldn't verify it. And so he had to unscrew the window and reach into the wheel well where the landing gear was. And so in my mind, the whole guy, he's got his body into it. I'm sure the window's not that big, but that's how I'm going to describe it. So he's trying to reach around and feel this little pin sticking out of a hole. And so he's going through that, and he's got his hand on the landing gear while this is happening. And all of a sudden we hear wham on the side of the plane, like something hit the side of the plane. And so an emergency is not that big of a deal, but now we had at least 3 by my count, and it's a C-130, so there's probably one more we didn't know about, and we couldn't figure out what happened. We just knew something had hit the plane, right? And so I was a very young co-pilot at the time, and thinking through ooh, this is the most serious situation I've ever been in, and it turned out it wasn't, but from my perspective at the time, that 3 emergencies at once is a lot. We were down an engine. We weren't 100% sure our landing gear was down and locked, so it might collapse on landing. And we had some kind of damage. We knew we had external damage to the plane. We just didn't know how bad it was, and we didn't know why it was there. We didn't know if something had fallen off the prop that we had just shut down or something. We didn't know. And I see the instructor pilot from the cargo hold. I see this guy get up, walk to the back of the plane, take a leak, walk to the front of the plane, and landed it, and greased the landing. Taxi clear, everything was cool, plane was fine. We got out of the plane, did the walk around, trying to figure out what all went wrong. They pinned the landing gear so it wouldn't collapse, and checked the engine. It was doing everything it was supposed to do. And we looked at the external fuel tank. So if you look at a C-130, there's usually a gas tank between the props on either wing. and it was crushed. The whole gas tank was crushed because we hit, I think it was a pterodactyl. I'm pretty sure it was an Arizona pterodactyl. It could have been a condor. It could have been just a big ass buzzard. Picture whatever the biggest bird you've ever seen in Arizona. Flamingo. I don't know what the hell it was. It was big. Possibly an ostrich, an emu, who knows? But it was at like 5,000 feet, so definitely an ostrich. And it was just one of those things like, shit happens in threes, it turns out. That was one of the cases where shit really did happen in threes. And any one of them was fine, and all of them together, it turned out, were fine. And I just remember the confidence of the pilot, and he's a phenomenal pilot, a phenomenal instructor. His name's Scott. Watching him walk to the back, take a leak, and go fucking do business, right? And go land the plane like a professional aviator. And I thought that was cool, and I have tried to emulate him, at least the taking a leak part, ever since. So
before hard decisions, yeah,
checks. So I think that's most of the war stories, at least most of the ones that are worth sharing. So when I think about all of them and what they mean overall, the lessons that I take from them and have always taken from them that I try to teach others is crew resource management. How you work as a team on a plane is a huge deal. And it's more than just like, yeah, we're a team. Like just the cheerleading part of it doesn't get you there, right? There are specific things you got to do as a member of a team. Communication among the team and between the plane and everybody else, right? And assertiveness. When you know you've got the right answer, fucking say so. When you know you're lined up on the wrong runway, say so, right?
Yeah, this is something I mentioned that we just taught this class at my agency for other agencies, right? We did a high-risk deployment seminar for K9 teams all over the state, basically. And a lot of this had to do with integrating K9 teams and SWAT. And in some places, K9 and SWAT are the same unit, right? They're part of each other. But in many places, you have your K9 unit, which is one entity, and then the SWAT team or the tactical team, which is another. And when you start integrating them, there are challenges that come with it. And a great example of that is, what are the right K9 teams, right? Because you're talking about one guy and one dog typically, to integrate with a larger SWAT team of maybe on any given operation, 5, 10, 15, 20, 40 people, something like that. And that assertive communication as an element of teamwork is a big deal, because I need that K9 handler to be willing to tell people who are, or a team leader on a team that he's not part of, right? He's got to be willing to speak up and say, hey, this is a limitation of the dog. This is a limitation of what I know that he can do, or that I know that, we've seen before and he's proven himself reliable in these circumstances. Or like, hey, he might be okay, but he might also do X, Y, or Z, and it might not work out, right? Like, you have to be able to speak up and say those things. And that's a huge part of being on a team, is even if you're the youngest guy or the outsider in some sense, or you're on a new crew or something like that, for teamwork to be effective, you got to be willing to speak up. And that's a big deal.
Absolutely. And related to the assertiveness, what I saw was the risk management, the ORM, operational risk management, is you got to be able to set a limit and then abide by it, right? Like, no, I'm not going to detonate the plane. Yes, I'm going to land. No, we're going to go around out of that. I'm not going to accept an unacceptable landing situation, right? And I think that combination of ORM and CRM, the Air Force has taught me a lot of things in my career. Most of it was bullshit. Like, I don't know how many fire extinguisher trainings I've had to do and how many awareness months I've had to sit through. But the two lessons that really do hit home with me are ORM and CRM. Those make sense to me. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can Google them. There's some great Wikipedia pages. Both the Air Force and Navy, NASA even has some good websites about it. So I think they're worth checking out. And for me, most of my really scary emergencies weren't emergency procedures. They weren't things I had a checklist for. They were immediate actions I had to take because I was very close to another airplane or very high, very slow and low, right? And what saved me was early recognition and situational awareness. Being clued in so that I recognized the cues that something was wrong, right? And I got that from institutional knowledge and mentoring. And you don't get that from computer-based training. You get that by talking to the 80-year-old sim instructor and hearing his war stories and hearing his political views. And somewhere in there, you might get a pearl of wisdom that you can hang on to. And finally, prioritization, aviate, fly the damn plane, navigate, know where you are, know where you're going. If you don't, at least make sure you look cool while you're doing it, and communicate. You do have to communicate, but that always comes last. And there's the internal communication, what you say within the crew, on the plane, within your team, and then how you communicate out of the plane or out of the team to everybody else. And you have to paint the picture, and you have to control your tone so you're not like, oh my God, this is real world, we're all going to die.
Not that that's ever happened.
Not that I've ever done that, certainly. But you do have to convey, you have to bring whoever that other person is into your reality so that they understand what you're seeing, where you're seeing it. So yeah, those are my war stories. I'm running low on scotch now.
Yeah, good times. I know. I need to refill as well. I think aviate, navigate, communicate is something that I've taught to cops because there's so many parallels for dealing with emergencies and crisis, just in general, crisis management type stuff. And I see a lot of cops get on the radio because that's like their whoopee. It makes them feel better to call out for help. But you can call for help. It's still seconds or minutes away at best. You got to handle the problem in front of you. And so I like that analogy, aviate, navigate, communicate in a law enforcement context. And I think it applies for self-defense as well and EMS or whatever. It doesn't matter, right? The idea is you have to deal with the problem in front of you and manage that crisis. You've got what's in your pockets, right? Like you've got what's on you to deal with that in the moment, and then orient yourself, make an assessment of the problem, and then start communicating and coordinating other resources. I think that's something that you can use in just about any context. So I like aviate, navigate, communicate a whole bunch.
One last thing I got to throw out is in very many of those cases, I was saved by one of the other crew members. And very often it was an enlisted crew member, and very often it was a very young crew member. So I owe each of them a shout out. The strength of our NCOs in the military is absolutely one of our secret weapons. It's one of the things that we have going for us that the Russians don't, the Chinese don't, the Iranians don't. And specifically, the guy who pushed me out of the way and got the fire put out, who I think, without hyperbole, we could say saved a bunch of lives that night, including mine. His name was Nicholas Heck. He was a crew chief. I believe he was a tech sergeant. On a later assignment, he committed suicide, and we did not do enough to stop that. We didn't do enough to save him. So that's just kind of on a serious note. There are a lot of heroes in the Air Force, a lot of heroes in the military, and they're not all zipper-suited sun god fighter pilots. Often they are a crew chief out there at Minot Air Force Base turning a wrench on a B-52, or at Cannon Air Force Base turning a wrench on a C-130, or at maybe they're at Hickam, Hawaii. Maybe they're turning a wrench on a C-17, living the dream. I don't know, but we owe them a serious debt of gratitude and recognition. All the maintainers that I've ever worked with, I got to give a shout out to. All of the enlisted crew members I've ever worked with, I got to give a shout out to, and even some of the navigators.
All right. Well, here's a toast.
America.
All right, guys, that's all we got for tonight. This episode is brought to you by Drip Drop. Drip Drop Oral Rehydration Solution is an electrolyte powder that you mix with water. It was formulated by a doctor for quick absorption. I work in the desert, and it only takes a few hours in the heat, wearing body armor, carrying around a bunch of gear before I start feeling like crap and fall behind the curve in dehydration. Drip Drop keeps you in the fight so you can finish the mission and rehab for the next one. Go get you some at dripdrop.com or on Amazon, or ask your supply guy to find it for you.
This episode is also brought to you by Dry Fire Mag. Ammo is hard to find these days, and you need to stay proficient by working your dry fire training. Dry Fire Mag solves the common and annoying problem in dry fire of constantly having to rack your slide to reset the trigger. With a Dry Fire Mag, all you do is clear your weapon, load this training mag up, and work on your trigger work. Check them out on dryfiremag.com.
Don't forget that we put out new episodes on the 1st and the 15th of every month. If you like what we're doing, you can head over to Patreon, give us $1 for each new episode. That money's going to go back into bringing you good content. If you want to interact with us, you could find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are at TacTangents. You can also email info@tacticaltangents.com. And one last thing, our Facebook discussion group. We've got a little group going on Facebook. If you go to the groups tab on our page, you can join it. We've got more followers on our page than we have in the group. So I know there's some of you out there following the Facebook page that are on Facebook that are not in the group. Lots of like-minded people in there. So come hang out with us. All right. That's all we got. Good talk.